Good morning. Thanks for being here. I'm Stephen Romo.
And I'm Zinclea Samoa. Joe and Savannah are on assignment this morning. Right now on Morning News Now, power struggle. This morning, California in crisis mode in what could be the state's hottest and longest September heat wave on record. Right now, thousands are bracing for blackouts as record-shattering temperatures take a toll on the state's electric grid.
These hotter days just create a lot of demand on the grid. It means our equipment has to work harder. It means generators have to work harder.
Plus, those soaring temperatures and dry conditions fueling the flames of a fast-moving wildfire. We'll bring you the latest. Fallout. New developments following that bombshell report about just what the FBI found at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. We'll tell you who's speaking out in the former president's defense, plus what we know ahead of Friday's deadline to submit names for a so-called special master to review the seized documents. In custody, breaking overnight, Las Vegas police make an arrest following the deadly stabbing of a local newspaper reporter. What officials are saying about who the suspect is and his connection with the victim. And hold the iPhone. Some big surprises from Apple at yesterday's unveiling of the tech giant's latest devices. We'll show you some of the most anticipated features of the newest iPhone, Apple Watch, and AirPods, and why one of the most shocking reveals of all isn't about the technology, but the price tag.
Ooh.
And Stephen, I actually lost my AirPods, so I might hit up this new.
I might lose mine. What a great excuse. I love that.
John, good to see you. Well, we begin this morning with the scorching heat wave out west.
Yeah, in California, temperatures may reach triple digits for a 10th day in many cities, shattering records and pushing the power grid to the limit. Officials there are urging people to reduce their power use during the busiest times to avoid those rolling blackouts. And the dangerous heat is fueling multiple wildfires across the state, including the Fairview fire outside Los Angeles, which has killed 2 people and destroyed nearly 20,000 acres. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer is in Burbank, California, with the latest.
The power grid is stretched to its max here in California, but it's not broken. Still, it'll be another scorcher in the state of California. Several cities will be in their triple digits for the 10th day in a row. And all across the West, the heat is on. Some 41 million people will be under heat advisories. Many of those are in major cities. They have been entering several days of this prolonged heat wave that for many areas will actually wrap up by the end of the week. Now, overnight here in California, there was concerns of more rolling blackouts. There were limited blackouts just a couple of days ago in very small cities, but that did not happen overnight. The demand for power was just under the available supply. The governor of California says it's conservation efforts that led to preventing rolling blackouts. Now, the power grid will continue to be tested all the way through the weekend, but fortunately, we're getting better weather all across the West. Here in California, we could see remnants from Hurricane K, which could actually bring rain and flash flooding to this area. That's a dramatic turnaround, a drop in 30 degrees from just a few days ago. A lot of weather changes here, but the good news, California's power grid is still holding. Back to you.
All right, Miguel, thank you.
Now let's get a check at your Morning News Now weather.
Michelle Grossman joins us with a look at all that's going on. Hey, Michelle.
There's a lot. Hi there, guys. And we're looking at temperatures into the triple digits once again today, tomorrow, and then some relief is on the way. So that's good news. Let's take a look at what's happening today, though. 41 million at risk under a heat alert, whether it's a heat advisory, that's in the orange, or an excessive heat warning, that is in the pink. That includes Sacramento, Fresno, Los Angeles, San Diego, also Las Vegas. We broke so many records yesterday. We're going to break more records today, also tomorrow. On top of that, we do have a fire risk. 11 million people impacted in portions of the Northern Rockies, the Intermountain West, Washington, Oregon, into Northern California. We're looking at really dry conditions. It's hot, and we're looking at the chance of some dry lightning as well. So as we go throughout time here, we're going to soar into the triple digits once again. 110 in Redding today, most likely breaking a record of 109. 107 in Fresno, Burbank, 105. 85 in Flagstaff, still really warm in Grand Junction, 98 degrees. And Denver, you're going to be near 100 degrees. That is today. Then tomorrow, we're looking at temperatures into the triple digits once again. So 106 in Bakersfield, Los Angeles, 100 degrees. But notice what happens on Saturday. We have a big relief coming. Temperatures into the mid-80s. That's going to feel good. Same story for San Diego. We're looking at 96 tomorrow, 81 degrees on Saturday. But it's because we do have some rain on the way. So as we look through time here, we're talking about Hurricane K. That's going to eventually impact southern Southern California, also the Southwest, so portions of Arizona. It's not going to be a hurricane at that point. It's not going to be a tropical storm, but still we're going to get some tropical moisture. So right now, the latest on Hurricane K is we're looking at a Category 1 storm with winds at 85 miles. It's moving pretty quickly to the northwest at 14 miles per hour. So as we go throughout time here, it's going to move off to the north. It's going to move off to the northwest as well. Kind of makes a little loop, too, a little strange path there. But as we go throughout time, it's going to lose its tropical characteristics, still bringing, though, rain to portions of Southern California. And we could see quite a bit of rain in some spots. So generally 1 to 2 inches, maybe 3 in the metro areas of Los Angeles, also San Diego. But notice those darker colors, the reds, the oranges, the higher mountains could see the risk for some flooding with locally higher amounts of 3 to 5 inches. So we're looking at some flooding, too, in the southeast. We're looking at the potential for some flooding with some heavy rain. Sun returns to the northeast. It's going to be a nice day there. Parts of the Great Lakes looking really good, too. But it's the southeast where we have an area of low pressure. It's very slow moving. We could see showers and storms with really heavy downpours. That could bring some flooding to portions of the Gulf Coast, once again, into the state of Florida as well. We had that yesterday. We're going to have it today, also tomorrow. So no storms erupting tomorrow on the Gulf Coast. And we could see some slow travel as well. Generally, for your rainfall forecast, 1 to 3 inches, but notice parts of the Carolinas into the coast of Georgia. We're looking at higher amounts. We could see locally 4 to 5 inches in some spots, especially along the coast of Florida and also along the Gulf Coast. So it's going to be a wet day once again in the South. They need the umbrella. I feel like that umbrella's been up all summer long.
And now into the fall. It's into the fall.
They can't put it away.
Exactly. I know.
All right, Michelle Grossman, thanks.
Thank you.
Sure.
We're also following 2 major breaking stories this morning. The first, overnight, police in Memphis arrested a man who went on a shooting spree throughout the city, killing 4 people and leaving 3 hurt. 19-year-old Ezekiel Kelly is now in custody, hours after police say he live-streamed some of the shootings that occurred in at least 8 different locations. Officials have charged Kelly with first-degree murder. Police in Memphis thanking residents for their help in capturing the suspect during an event they're describing as a mass mobile shooting.
This has been a horrific week for the city of Memphis and the Memphis Police Department. We extend our sincere condolences to all the victims who have been affected in this sequence of violent acts today. We want to express our sincere appreciation to our citizens who provided numerous tips throughout this ordeal.
Police have not released the identity of the victims. No word on a motive yet this morning, but Kelly had been released from prison earlier this year after serving 11 months for aggravated assault. We'll have much more on this story coming up in our next hour.
More breaking news now, this time out of Las Vegas. An elected official has been arrested in connection with the deadly stabbing of local reporter Jeff Gehrman on Saturday. The Las Vegas Review-Journal's editor says Clark County Public Administrator Robert Tellis is in custody in connection with Gehrman's murder. Tellis had been the subject of a series of unflattering stories by the reporter. Local media reported SWAT team members were outside of Tellis's home late Wednesday afternoon. As authorities searched inside, officials had this to say about the investigation.
It's very important for us not only to identify and arrest the suspect, but we want to do this case in a way where we can have a solid prosecution and hold that person accountable.
69-year-old Gehrman was found dead outside of his home Saturday morning. His co-workers said he didn't express any fears for his safety in the days leading up to his death.
Now to the ongoing legal battle between former President Donald Trump and the Department of Justice over the FBI search of Trump's Florida home. Both sides are facing a Friday deadline to submit names for the so-called special master. That's the independent arbiter who will oversee the seized documents. NBC News legal analyst Glenn Kirshner joins us now for more on this. Glenn, it's good to see you this morning. So let's start on that issue of the special master. There's still a big question of whether the Justice Department will appeal the judge's ruling to even appoint one in the first place. So do you expect the DOJ to appeal?
You know, anytime the Department of Justice is engaged in a debate on whether to appeal a trial court judge's decision or not, there are a couple of considerations in play. One is what happens if they lose the appeal? If they lose the appeal, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is where any appeal of Judge Cannon's decision would go, would then set precedent. And that would have implications moving forward because that would apply to all other cases that are similar to this one. Now, people may say, how many cases are we going to have where a president has had seized from his home national security documents, and now the courts are wrestling with what kind of restrictions to put on the Department of Justice. That's a fair point. But I think people should keep in mind, a trial court's opinion, Judge Cannon's opinion, has zero precedential value. What trial court judges do doesn't set precedent, but what appellate courts do sets precedent. So that's one of the things I think the Department of Justice has to wrestle with. If they file an appeal, do they believe it will be successful? If not, what kind of precedent might be set that could hurt future government investigations?
Yeah, that's an important distinction. And Glenn, I know we're also getting more reaction from yesterday's major Washington Post report, which says that one of the documents seized at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate included details about a foreign government's nuclear capabilities. NBC News has not confirmed that, but Trump's former colleagues have been speaking out about it. First, let's hear what they had to say.
It's very, very troubling that this type of information would be there or anywhere for that matter. 300 classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago, and that simply should have never happened in the first place.
Will the government be able to make out a technical case? Will they have evidence by which that they could indict somebody on, including him? I think they're getting very close to that point.
So, Glenn, if this reporting is confirmed, what could this revelation mean for this legal battle? And is what Bill Barr said right there? Are we getting closer to an indictment of Trump?
Yeah, take it from a former 30-year federal prosecutor. There's ample evidence to bring charges against Donald Trump. But I'll tell you, with that blockbuster revelation about the documents that Donald Trump took, he had no authority to take them from the White House, and then he unlawfully concealed them at Mar-a-Lago. Now that we know that those documents include information about a foreign government's nuclear programs, I think that ups the ante on the appeal front, because Judge Cannon issued a stop work order. And now we know she ordered the prosecutors to stop criminally investigating these documents. I think when we look at the potential danger, not only to our national security, but now the national security of a foreign country, a stop investigation order is really dramatic. I would suggest it's unprecedented. And whereas she said, well, the national security assessment can continue, but the prosecutors must stop dead in their tracks when it comes to criminally investigating these documents. I think that militates in favor of the Department of Justice taking an appeal, because I think we need to have this matter fully, fairly, aggressively investigated.
Glenn, important insights on a political issue we're all following very closely. Thank you.
Well, Steve Bannon is expected to turn himself in to New York authorities today to face indictment on state charges. That's according to a report from the Washington Post. The district attorney's office started an investigation last year into Bannon in connection with his role in a charity aimed at building a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. In a separate federal investigation into this charity, Bannon and 3 others were indicted on charges of defrauding hundreds of thousands of donors. NBC News correspondent Tom Winter joins us now from outside the courthouse. And Tom, as we mentioned, Bannon is facing charges here in New York State. We know President Trump, though, pardoned him on those federal charges. Is there any indication about the nature of these charges and how they may differ from the federal ones?
Right. So as reported back in February 2021, state prosecutors in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office were taking a look at the exact conduct that you just outlaid in the course of that federal investigation and eventual federal indictment of Steve Bannon. What they were looking at is whether there were any violations of state law. So this is believed to be closely tied to that investigation. As you said, federal prosecutors alleging that Bannon stole hundreds of thousands of dollars along with his cohorts. They initially presented, and certainly his cohorts, at this We Build a Wall, which was a private effort to build the southern border wall. They alleged that when they made representations to people saying they were working as volunteers, that 100% of the money that they raised would go to building that wall, they were actually siphoning some of those funds, the millions that they raised, off into their own pockets, specifically to Bannon, that he created a nonprofit entity that could be paid, but in fact, it went to pay Bannon's personal expenses. So that was that investigation. This is believed to be closely tied to that. We don't have the specific charges yet. We don't know how significant this case might be because they haven't been unsealed. We do know that Bannon is scheduled to arrive here within the next several hours in Manhattan State Court behind me.
And Tom, Bannon issued a statement to NBC News saying, in part, New York has now decided to pursue phony charges against me 60 days before the midterm election. This is nothing more than a partisan political weaponization of the criminal justice system. So what kind of defense can we expect here from Bannon's team?
Probably a lot like that. I think he's probably going to take these charges head on. Look, when you look at the statement that he made, there's no rule in state cases that they have to not charge somebody 60 days or 50 days or 10 days before a midterm election. State prosecutors make the charges that they do. Bannon might be referring to federal prosecutors in the Justice Department guidelines, though it's not a rule and it's not a law that says you shouldn't indict somebody that may be in a political election or closely tied to it within 60 days. But that just doesn't apply here. He's represented by Robert Costello, who's a veteran attorney, knows New York City very well. He's somebody who's represented Bannon in the past. He's somebody who's represented Rudy Giuliani. He also worked for Rudy Giuliani when he was his head of the criminal prosecutions when Rudy Giuliani was a federal prosecutor 30-plus years ago. So that's the backstory on his attorney, Robert Costello. It'll be, no doubt, a vigorous defense.
And Tom, in a separate case, just quickly here, wanted to ask, Bannon was convicted of contempt of Congress charges. On Friday, a federal judge rejected his request for a new trial, and he's set to be sentenced next month. How could this jail time he may be facing play into these new charges?
Yeah, I don't think it's really that case is really going to impact this particular state case. There, he faces a minimum of 30 days, up to a year for each one of the 2 counts that he was found guilty on. Just depends on if the judge wants to sentence consecutively or concurrently, how that jail time will work itself out. But this is an entirely separate case. There'll be some coordination at some point if Bannon is in jail with respect to any sort of pre-trial or trial that will occur at state court behind me. But for all purposes, these are going to be separate cases. We don't even know if Bannon will be jail eligible, if you will, if he's convicted on any potential charges filed today.
More to come on several fronts. Tom Winter, thanks.
Turning now to a White House reunion. Yesterday, former President and First Lady Barack and Michelle Obama returned to the White House for the unveiling of their official White House portraits. NBC News Chief White House correspondent Kristen Welker has more.
It was a first family affair.
Barack and Michelle, welcome home. Welcome home.
For the country, a return of a White House tradition. For Michelle Obama, her first visit back in more than 5 years.
Michelle, he knows, we all know, he couldn't have done it without you.
The former president nostalgic.
When people ask me what I miss most about the White House years, it is not Air Force One that I talk about, although I miss Air Force One. It's the chance that I had to stand shoulder to shoulder with all of you.
A reunion of a political partnership forged over 2 terms.
We trusted him, all of you in this room. We believed in him, and we counted on him. And I still do.
Joe, it is now America's good fortune to have you as president.
Mr. Obama thanking artists Robert McCurdy and Sharon Sprung, quipping the portrait of Mrs. Obama captures what he loves most.
Her grace, her intelligence, and the fact that she's fine.
Let me thank my husband, first of all, for such spicy remarks.
An emotional Michelle Obama saying the portraits stand for something larger.
A girl like me, she was never supposed to be up there next to Jacqueline Kennedy and Dolly Madison. And it is so important for every young kid who is doubting themselves to believe that they can too. That is what this country is about.
The bipartisan tradition goes back decades.
You will now be able to gaze at this portrait and ask, what would George do?
But former President Trump did not invite Mr. Obama, a mutual decision, according to sources. Still, this moment particularly poignant for the first black president and first lady who will live on these walls for history. Kristen Welker, NBC News, the White House.
Beautiful portraits there. Well, coming up on Morning News Now, swing state showdown.
The midterms are now just weeks away, and several election deniers are on the ballot in key states. More on those races and why they could have a major impact in 2024 and beyond. Welcome back. The midterm elections are less than 9 weeks away, and races for Secretary of State and Attorney General are getting extra attention this year. Several key swing states have prominent 2020 presidential election deniers on the ballot. A victory in November would give them authority to oversee elections in 2024 and beyond. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard has more.
Now, these secretaries of state and attorneys general races are attracting millions of dollars in campaign contributions, towering over similar races from previous midterm elections, according to data from the Bannon Center. Now, if these election deniers pull off these victories, it could put the sanctity of U.S. elections in jeopardy. This fall, it's not just Senate, House, and governor's races garnering immense attention ahead of the midterms. That's because it's many of the down-ballot races in key swing states that could hold the fate of American democracy in their results.
So let us work together to restore election security, election integrity, and the rule of law.
Secretaries of state are responsible for overseeing their state's elections, and in states like Arizona, responsible for certifying the presidential results before sending to D.C.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
In 2020, each Secretary of State signed off. But now, some self-proclaimed election-denying Republicans in 5 key states could change that. Several have refused to say that they would have certified Joe Biden's 2020 win. Others, like Arizona's Mark Fincham, even saying he would work to decertify the last presidential election if he wins this November.
Ladies and gentlemen, we know it, and they know it. Donald Trump won.
Fincham's challenger, Democrat Adrian Fontes.
To what extent are you articulating the threats to democracy at the forefront of your campaign?
Well, the threats to democracy could not be any worse right now. We're talking about folks who do not want democracy to run in a normal way. They don't want elections to operate in a predictable, regular fashion like a heartbeat. That's bad for business. It's bad for education. It's bad for law, because elections are that golden thread that run through the fabric of society.
Christina Caramo is the GOP's candidate for Secretary of State in Michigan, but refuses to say Biden won her state in 2020, despite him securing 150,000 more votes than Trump.
You don't disagree with the statement that Joe Biden won Michigan?
I'm not going to comment on that. I personally witnessed it about being cast.
You're not willing to say that Joe Biden won the Michigan election?
I will say this. I personally witnessed it about being cast.
There is no evidence backing up Caramo's skepticism of the 2020 results. Even the state's Republican-led Senate Oversight Committee found, quote, no evidence of widespread or systematic fraud after an 8-month review. In Arizona, the Attorney General must also certify the state's election results. Abe Hamadeh is running as the state's Republican nominee.
I will fight to secure our elections so that when Donald Trump runs and wins again in 2024, everyone will know it's legitimate.
He is running against Democrat Chris Mays.
Well, I think this year people across the country realize that because attorney generals are part of the certification process for presidential elections, that we've got to focus on AG races. And I think most people are starting to see that.
Our thanks to Vaughn Hilliard for that report.
International headlines now, starting with major developments in the hunt for a mass stabbing suspect in Canada.
Claudio Lavanga joins us now from Rome with that and more. Good morning, Claudio.
Good morning, guys. Yes, Canadian police say that Miles Sanderson, one of the 2 brothers who went on a stabbing spree last weekend, has died after he went into what they said it was medical distress following his arrest on Wednesday. Now, the attack left 10 people dead and several others injured. His brother, Damien Sanderson, was found dead the day after the attack. And let's move to Haiti, where thousands of people organized fresh protests in several cities on Wednesday to demand safer streets, more affordable goods, and the resignation of the country's prime minister. Protesters marched through the streets blocked by rocks, tracks, and burning tires, and in some cases, the police fired tear gas to disperse the crowd. And let's go to Switzerland, where Swiss retailer Migros said it will launch a coffee maker that will replace polluting capsules with environmentally friendly coffee bowls. While traditional capsules are made with plastic and aluminium, the new coffee maker, they say, it will make use of fully compostable coffee bowls, or you call it capsules, enclosed in seaweed cover.
Seaweed?
Hopefully the coffee also doesn't taste of sweet seaweed. Yeah.
We hope not, and I'm looking forward to trying coffee balls.
Yeah, I could use some coffee balls this morning.
Interesting, Claudia.
Thank you for that.
And coming up, backlash over a new ruling that lets employers refuse coverage for HIV prevention pills.
Up next, more on the decision by a federal judge and why advocates say it puts millions at risk. This is Morning News Now. Welcome back. Most kids have already made their way back to the classroom for the fall semester, but many have yet to get their COVID-19 vaccine. That's despite a rise in pediatric cases. White House COVID response coordinator Dr. Ashish Jha joined Lester Holt on Nightly News to discuss ways to protect children while they're at school and shared why he thinks vaccines are essential to prevent COVID this winter.
We're barely into the school year, Doctor, and already we're seeing an uptick in juvenile COVID cases, up 14% last week over the prior 2 weeks. Is it too early to begin reconsidering the COVID guidelines in schools?
Yeah, first of all, Lester, thanks for having me back. You know, we expected some of this. As kids get back to school, you are going to see more mingling, more people spending time indoors. I think the key is that we want to make sure people are protected. And the best way to do that for children is to get them vaccinated, because vaccines both prevent infection but also really prevent serious illness. That should be the #1 goal.
And I know you've been heavily delivering the mantra about vaccinations, but the reality, only a third of kids ages 5 to 11 have even received a first dose. What's going wrong there?
I think what we've always said about kids and kids vaccines is that these things take time. And when I think back to December of 2020, when the first vaccines came out, only about a third of adults said they'd get vaccinated. Now we know that 80% of adults have gotten fully vaccinated. What we want to do is encourage parents to talk to their pediatricians, talk to their trusted voices in their community. I think as that happens, you are going to see more and more children get vaccinated.
If you are someone who only has that initial 2-dose vaccine combination and have not had a booster shot to this point, are you in increased danger?
No question about it. If you have not had any additional shots beyond that first 2, presumably it's been a year and a half since you got it, your protection at this point is far more limited. For that group, for everybody, but for that group particularly, I think it's critical to go out and get this new updated bivalent vaccine. I really do think it's going to make an enormous difference.
And a Texas federal judge ruled employers are not required to provide coverage for HIV prevention pills, saying the treatment violates religious freedoms, making it unconstitutional. The decision has sparked backlash from advocacy groups who fear the ruling puts millions at risk.
Yeah, and that case was brought on by several plaintiffs, including 2 Christian-owned businesses who opposed a key provision in the Affordable Care Act that requires free coverage of most preventative treatments, including HIV drugs. The plaintiffs claimed they did not want to pay for health care that contradicted their religious beliefs, saying the drug encouraged same-sex relationships. Well, the drug maker argued the pill is not specifically for LGBTQ plus people and went on to say HIV does not target specific communities.
To get into this, NBC News medical reporter Erica Edwards joins us now. Erica, good morning. So advocates in favor of the HIV prevention treatment say this will have wide-reaching consequences beyond the pills themselves. So what other preventative treatments or health care programs could be in jeopardy?
Hi, good morning. You know, theoretically, this argument could be applied to any number of treatments, including birth control and vaccinations. In fact, the lawsuit included religious objection to contraception, to the HPV vaccine, as well as screening for drug use and sexually transmitted diseases. So certainly far-reaching implications. Zinkley, Stephen?
And Erica, many Democrats are speaking out about this decision, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. In a statement, Pelosi said, quote, "This disturbing decision amounts to open homophobia, unleashing unthinkable suffering and death, specifically among the LGBTQ community." Do you think that's accurate? And can you explain to us why PrEP and other HIV prevention treatments are a key part of the government's effort to stop the spread of HIV?
Well, you know, first of all, as you mentioned earlier, HIV can impact anybody, full stop, right? However, most of the people in this country who take PrEP are men who have sex with men. Now, PrEP stands for pre-exposure prophylaxis. It usually comes in a pill form. It's taken every day. And when taken as directed, it can drive down the risk for contracting HIV through sex by 99%, especially among men who have sex with men. That's major. What's more, PrEP can also reduce the risk of acquiring HIV through injectable drug use by at least 74%. Stephen Zinkley, that's why PrEP has been so instrumental in bringing down the number of new cases.
And Erica, it is important to note that access is already an issue for HIV prevention. And according to the CDC, 66% of people who are prescribed PrEP are white, compared to just 16% of the Latinx community and 9% of black patients. So will this ruling widen the racial and ethnic gap there?
Undoubtedly. I mean, according to a federal HIV/AIDS program, about half of the people living in this country with HIV live in underserved areas. They have no health insurance, and they are low income. About half of that group are Black Americans. Compare that to that 9% that you were just citing. Another quarter of people in that group are white. So certainly HIV and AIDS activists say that this ruling will undoubtedly widen that gap. And they say that certainly it could have far-reaching implications.
Erica Edwards on that ongoing fight for HIV prevention. Thank you. And coming up on Morning News Now, changing the game. Former NBA stars now taking their talents to historically black colleges as coaches.
And after the break, we'll talk to one of those coaches, Kenny Anderson, about his journey from the pros to HBCUs and the impact he's hoping to make on the lives of young athletes. Welcome back. Florida schools have been back in session for about a month now. And this year, the state government is putting restrictions on classroom content and conversations. A new law limits LGBTQ issues and identities from being discussed in the classroom. It's raising concerns and confusion among teachers as to how they should navigate while in the classroom. NBC News Digital reporter Maya Eaglin has more.
The school year in Florida is 1 month in, a time usually filled with excitement among families and teachers. But for some, now filled with hesitation and fear.
This year in particular has been kind of a watershed year for the signing and potential implementation of legislation that really impacts just about everybody who is in or near a classroom in Florida.
Peter Lake is an education law professor at Stenton Law School.
It appears to me that the state of Florida is actually testing legal boundaries that were somewhat established in the 20th century.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed 2 bills into law on July 1st. Both allegedly aim at removing certain ideologies from schools. The Stop Woke Act, keeping critical race theory out of classrooms, and the Parental Rights in Education Act, widely referred to as the Don't Say Gay bill by critics.
It never was part of the curriculum for K through 3. I really don't know where they got the idea that this was being taught to children, that we were trying to change their gender identity and roles.
Paula Stevens is a first-grade teacher at Eisenhower Elementary School in Pinellas County. Under these new laws, every single book she uses in her classroom has to be reviewed by the district's media specialist.
It just seems that we're not focusing on what the real needs are for our kids.
Teachers say they still need specific guidance from the state about the appropriate way to handle these conversations if students bring it up.
The moment you tell me that these kids cannot feel comfortable or safe, or I'm supposed to watch what I say, that to me, I can't.
Octavio Hernandez is an algebra teacher at Davenport High School. He says his students are the only ones that matter.
They're not numbers. They're not statistics. They're actual human beings.
There's confusion among many teachers, especially with the potential legal ramifications they could face if they violate these policies.
One of the lawsuits that has been filed deals with the what they call the parental rights. And in responding to that lawsuit, in their motion to dismiss, the state said that conversations can occur around some of the topics related to the LGBTQ community if it's in an age-appropriate way.
Andrew Spar is president of Florida's largest teachers union. He says the lack of clarity is a big issue.
What we don't want to see by any stretch of the imagination is this idea that kids can't be themselves.
The state says school districts can expect some additional guidance on some of these new rules in January, according to Spar. But some teachers feel like they have to be more careful.
Am I saying something wrong? Is this book okay? You know, it's like you're questioning yourself more and more.
Others refuse to be filtered.
I'm not telling my students whether being gay is right or whether being gay is wrong. What I tell my students is you have every right to be whoever the hell you want to be.
Alex Lanfranconi, head of communications for the Florida Department of Education, tells NBC News in part, these laws are meant to prioritize the rights of parents, not limit teachers, adding, quote, parents deserve transparency about their child's school curriculum, instructional materials, and services.
Teachers are afraid to say something. Parents are too busy to get involved. So who do the kids have? Who do the kids have to turn to if they can't even talk in the classroom?
Our thanks to Maya Eaglin for that report. Attorneys for a group of parents, students, and nonprofit organizations are suing four school boards and 4 districts and asked a federal judge for a preliminary injunction. They argue that policies in Florida's parental rights and education law violate its First Amendment due process and equal protection rights. Florida's Attorney General and those 4 school boards are fighting it.
Now to college basketball and a movement changing the game as we know it. When it comes to recruiting, colleges like the University of Kentucky, the University of Kansas, Georgetown, and Duke have dominated the field and court. But that is shifting. Historically, black colleges are now becoming the top pick for high school basketball standouts. One of the nation's top recruits, Zion Harmon, a guard for Western Kentucky University, just transferred to Bethune-Cookman University. And HBCUs are also attracting coaches who've played in the NBA, like Kenny Anderson, the former NBA All-Star known as the Point God, who's been head coach at Fisk University for 4 years. Kenny Anderson, head coach for Fisk University's men's basketball team, the Point God, joins us now. Thank you so much, and good morning to you, Kenny.
Good morning. Good morning to you.
So glad you can be here. So the movement of major athletes to HBCUs is making the nation take notice of these schools. So how do you see this changing the landscape of college athletics?
It'll change slowly but surely. You know, guys like myself that gotten all the attention from playing basketball, different levels, high school, college, now pros. And now I'm in, at Fisk trying to give back of what I've learned. That's basically it. Trying to give back what my coach Jack Curran at Archbishop Malloy did for me, trying to give to my young men that I'm coaching here at Fisk.
And it's so clear that you are giving back to these guys. I mean, you were an All-American player at Georgia Tech and an NBA All-Star during your 14-year professional career, and you really could have gone anywhere. So why did you specifically choose Fisk, and what do you hope to accomplish during your tenure there? What do you want your legacy to be?
The last president that was here, Kevin Rome, he hired me. He went to Morehouse and I went to Georgia Tech, and he knew I wanted to get into coaching. So he called on me. I came to visit Fisk. I knew it needed some work. It needs some work with the athletic program, but I said I'm here to give back. It was a great connection, and I'm so happy that he put me involved into coming to Fisk. And, it's so many things that I plan on doing for the athletic program, but it takes time.
Is there anything you're most excited about doing of what you just mentioned?
We want to get our facilities, the gym, built, So I'm trying to raise like a $2 million, from our sponsorship. And so many people that I do know, I'm trying to reach out to these young men to see if I can get that for Fisk University. It would be a changing experience for not only for me, but for the players, for just everybody around that wants to give Fisk an opportunity. It's one of the greatest schools academically in the country, HBCU, but we're trying to build an athletic program up.
Yeah, and as you say that, I'm reminded of something you actually said. You said that you want your time at Fisk to, quote, have these young men better themselves, not just athletically, but educationally and in other ways. And I think a perfect example is Jeremiah Armstead, a teen from California who you just selected to play for Fisk. He's had a challenging journey. He experienced homelessness, lived out of a car, domestic violence, shelters with his mom and siblings, but even still, he beat the odds and now will be playing at Fisk, selected by you. So talk about him and why you thought he was the perfect fit for you.
Jeremy is a great young man, great for the program. He was homeless in Los Angeles. I was homeless in New York. It was like the story. We both have faced it. I was a junior in high school, an All-American, everything, but I got evicted. Me and my mother and my cousin had to, I had to live with her, and my mother used to come and visit me every morning. So it was kind of, before I went to school and before we got on our feet the following year, my senior year in high school. So it was sort of like the same story. I was just in New York. He was out west. So he comes from a great family, a great background, and he's a great young man, very smart. And I'm just trying to get him in the right position so he can better himself, better his life.
Amazing. I mean, it's clear that he's in the right position, and you are really preparing these guys for success. So, Kenny Anderson, thank you for your time and your work.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
And now to our financial headlines and the latest on the Twitter acquisition trial.
CNBC's Pippa Stevens joins us now with that and other news. Good morning, Pippa.
Good morning. A judge in Delaware is denying Elon Musk's request to delay his trial over his attempt to back out of his $44 billion takeover of Twitter. The judge will allow Musk's lawyers to add arguments based on allegations of a whistleblower of mismanagement at Twitter. But she also sharply criticized Musk and his team for not properly handing over text messages that could be evidence in the lawsuit. The trial is set to begin in mid-October. And former Disney CEO Bob Iger says the pandemic has fundamentally changed how people consume media. Speaking at the Code Conference in Beverly Hills last night, Iger says he doesn't believe moviegoing will ever return to pre-pandemic levels. He says people became more comfortable with streaming services while in lockdown, growing to enjoy the content on these platforms and the flexibility of being able to watch when and where they want. And the holiday shopping season may not officially begin until late November, but many consumers plan to get started early. A new survey from Bankrate finds half of people say they'll start holiday shopping by Halloween. About 40% say inflation will change the way they shop this year. More than a quarter say they will go into debt for their purchases with credit cards or a buy now, pay later service. And more than 80% of people plan to find ways to save money, including seeking coupons and discounts and buying fewer items. Guys, I'm already seeing the Halloween decorations in CVS, and it already feels too soon.
I think I saw them in August, and I was a little...
All right. August. Wow.
Pippa, thank you so much.
Well, coming up, Apple answering the call with the unveiling of its newest iPhone.
That's right. When we come back here on Morning News Now, what sets it apart from the rest, plus how soon you can get your hands on it.
Welcome back. Sharing a new fact about modern living with you. You cannot escape pumpkin spice season, whether it's on store shelves or in your local coffee shop. And now it's even in the dictionary. The phrase is one of the 369 new words just added by Merriam-Webster. Some of the other food-related additions this year include oat milk, plant-based, and the Vietnamese bread banh mi. The list is not just limited to food. Some of the other new words are ripped from recent headlines this morning. And we have yeet to tell you about. That means to take something away. You may not be familiar with that one, but maybe you are. And we also know adorkable also made that list. While many of those terms may not seem new to you, Merriam-Webster says the public needs to be familiar with them pretty well before they actually get added to the dictionary.
Wow, so many new words. You could say it's adorkable.
Adorkable. Yeah, we didn't explain that one. I think that one's pretty explainable. Adorkable.
Adorkable.
Dorky,
it also made me a little hungry, this discussion.
Oh, yes.
Spice,
so much of it was coffee. Oat milk, yeah. Supply chain was also in that list. That one's less fun, so I skipped over that one, but a lot going on there.
Well, up next, Apple announced new iPhones, watches, and AirPods yesterday. They're equipped with features that CEO Tim Cook says could help save lives, including the ability to make satellite phone calls and car crash detection. And here's one of the biggest surprises to come from the event. Apple says it is not raising prices. NBC News correspondent Gotti Schwartz has the details.
Apple's biggest sales pitch is a promise to deliver life-saving features right into the palm of your hand.
I only had the watch for 2 or 3 weeks.
And onto your wrist.
I slipped headfirst into the compactor.
I was skating on a frozen river when the ice gave out.
The door closed and everything went dark.
CEO Tim Cook sharing powerful testimonials of lives already saved.
Rescuers arrived in minutes.
If I hadn't had the Apple Watch, things could have been much worse.
before announcing two groundbreaking new features. The iPhone 14, the first model equipped to call for help without cell phone service.
Now, your iPhone can connect you with the help you need when you're off the grid, like this.
Emergency SOS will walk users through how to point their phone at the nearest satellite to call for help or even send short text messages.
We worked with emergency experts to surface the questions they're most likely to ask, and we provided the most common responses for you to choose from with just a few taps.
And the Apple Watch Series 8 and phones coming with a built-in tool to detect high-impact car crashes and immediately call for help.
Now the microphone detects impact noise, the accelerometer senses rapid deceleration, and the barometer measures a shift in pressure consistent with an airbag going off.
Beyond personal safety, the latest line of iPhones coming with expected upgrades to displays and battery life, and a new Pro camera promising to disrupt the way movies are made and pictures are taken with a sensor 65% larger than the last model and improved stabilization.
iPhone 14 Pro is capable of shots that for most film cameras are simply impossible.
Still, some experts are disappointed by a lack of revolutionary new tech, while others are surprised that pricing remains relatively flat in a year when supply chain disruptions and inflation have increased so many other costs.
Roughly a fourth of the 1 billion iPhone users have not upgraded in 3.5 years. And I think often price has something to do with it. And I think given the fact that we might be in a recession or the recession may be deepening, I think Apple has to acknowledge that.
Thanks to Gadi Schwartz for that report. And there's definitely going to be a lot of interest in this latest iPhone. Apple has more than 1 billion iPhone users, and the iPhone still accounts for more than half of Apple's sales.
Wow. And for more on the iPhone 14 and other highlights from Apple's announcement, Mark Salzman, freelance tech reporter and host of Tech It Out, joins us now. Mark, let's get to the question on most people's minds. They'll care a lot about how and when do they get their hands on those new iPhones?
Yeah, pre-orders have already started with the Apple Watch a day early. And then for the iPhone 14 family, they start tomorrow, the 9th of September. That's to place a pre-order. And then it will be available a week later. So on the 16th for the regular iPhone 14, a week later for the iPhone 14 Plus, which is the larger 6.7-inch version. And then similarly for the iPhone 14 Pro, which had all those fancy features that your last package showed, that's going to be also available on September 16th. But pre-orders are available tomorrow. But Apple.com already has Apple Watch ready for a day early for the Apple Watch Series 8, which is also, it garnered quite a bit of buzz yesterday as well. Not as much as the iPhone 14 family, but exciting nonetheless.
And you talked about the watch, you talked about the phone. Let's talk about the AirPods and the AirPod Pro. What do buyers need to know about these?
Yeah, so the new AirPods Pro 2 have, of course, better quality audio with this new H2 chip, and that includes better active noise cancellation as well to block out ambient noise, longer battery life, which is probably the #1 thing customers have asked for, now up to 6 hours. There's some personalized, what they call spatial audio, so you can now customize the kind of audio that you want to hear through the app. And maybe one of the sort of underrated features is the ability to find your iPods Pro case. So in the event you lose the case, you can now use the Find My feature to locate it on a map.
Ooh, that'll come in handy. And Mark, Gadi mentioned earlier that many people were expecting Apple to increase prices on smartphones at the iPhone 14 unveiling, but that didn't happen. What do you think the company did all that for?
Well, I think that it would be tone deaf if they did raise prices considerably. The fact that they remain the same, but some new features, maybe not, maybe more evolutionary than revolutionary, but still the trend is usually to raise prices. That was a welcomed addition to yesterday's announcement. So I think that they recognize that there are, despite supply chain issues, which raise costs for Apple to buy components, we are facing a possible recession. At the very least, there's very high inflation. So I think if they want to keep iPhone the #1 device in the country, they're doing the right thing.
They're still not cheap, but let's take what we can get.
That is true.
Yeah,
that is true. Yeah.
Mark Salzman, thanks so much.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.